Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another in the series of the Driftless dialogue discussion. This is the fifth year of this particular series, which is sponsored by the Kickapoo Valley Reforestation or Newsom Fund. To go along with that, we would like to have everybody sign in tonight. We have a sign-up sheet here, so if you would put your name down and give us some information, we would appreciate that. Tonight's program is going to feature a look at the Ho-Chunk history in the Driftless area. Our speaker tonight is George Garvin, and he has worked with the Ho-Chunk Nation Cultural Resources Division since 1998. George is the repatriations researcher for the nation. We appreciate him for stepping in for Bill Quackenbush on short notice. And again, tonight he will speak on the Ho-Chunk in the Driftless area. So let's welcome George.
Like it was said, I was a fill-in tonight. And the guy that usually does this, his name is Bill Quackenbush. He's a Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for Ho-Chunk Nation. I'm the NAGPRA designee, Native American Repatriation Protection Act designee. I bring human remains back to the nation's homeland from institutions and museums throughout the United States. And often I get caught into some awkward predicaments where I have to prove that Ho-Chunk Nation had a vast domain at one time. Ho-Chunk Nation, as some of you may not know, we are the oldest inhabitants of Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota, Missouri, and a few other places. Our name, Ho-Chunk, to some people would not mean anything really, but to our people, Ho-Chunk is first voice, the father tongue. And the English language has a habit of creating misnomers for different people, and they call us a Siouan-speaking people. And if we were to rewrite history, I guess our subsidiaries would be known as Ho-Chunkian speakers. So I often like to put clarity to that right away. And Mr. Quackenbush told me, he said, this will be easy. You can use my PowerPoint. I don't like PowerPoint, so. And my thought behind that is perhaps I may not meet your expectations through a PowerPoint, and a lot of my presentation will be based on what you would call as hearsay. But for us, it's an oral tradition, oral knowledge that has been passed on throughout centuries. And I've had the opportunity to know a couple of centurions that were in existence 8 years ago, and shared some dialogue with them. And they told me of animals that we knew. And you often reflect on your thinking. For an example, just up the way, we have Boaz. And there was a woolly elephant found there one time, and our people knew that elephant when the Anglo-Americans were going to circuses around here. So when we first seen the elephant, again, it didn't frighten anybody. They just said, oh, there he is. So another animal that they used to talk about was a huge bison. Well, he's not here anymore. We just have these little fella we call bison. And we knew another animal that doesn't exist anymore, the short-faced bear. But all those animals were in our oral traditions at one time. Another animal that we don't see anymore, what the heck they call him, saber-toothed tiger. Our people talked about him as well. So, and to take it a bit further, these old gentlemen, they used to tell me that their grandfathers told them of a time when the Mississippi River flowed backward. You have to scratch your head and say, I wonder what they were talking about. And a few years ago, we have a ranch or a farm down near Muscadet, and we own a huge farm, and we had some land taken in for study, but the land that we allowed to be studied was not from here in Wisconsin. It was from Minnesota, and got everybody wondering again. And so the gentleman was around, and he got to come down and look at them funny. And he was an elderly man. He was well over 105 when he left us. So he spoke his mind. He told his thoughts. But he recited a time in history that were, you know, things that were handed down. Oh, our peoples survived through many episodes of time. I guess the last, when we became historic, was our worst time in history as a people. Our peoples, there is no exact count. When Jean Nicolet landed up in Red Banks, our peoples were vast, and we didn't have any immunity to any of the illnesses that wander this earth now. So after he left, our populations were decimated, and things happened. And a lot of our oral suffered. So here and there we scrapped things together. And it was a hard time from that point on. But we all, as people, have something in common. And I was quite surprised to see this many people turn out for tonight. And our common interest is the Kickapoo Valley, you know, and keeping it rolling and green and whatnot. And I sat there, and my brother-in-law, well, we come down here every now and then and help Kickapoo out with different activities, get lost in the back hills. But it's a nice place. It's a place that we called home. We've seen all these animals that I talked about earlier. And some rock formations, caves they call them, rock shelters. You see these images of these different animals on the walls. So, like I say, we survived. We were here all this time. We've seen 2 glacier periods come down and go back. We've seen that. And, well, we all seen one in the 1830s, I believe they call it, a little glacier period. So we all seen that. Well, not us here, but our great-grandparents. But, you know, here in Wisconsin, in these coulees, valleys, whatever you want to call them, we lived. We lived with nature. We harvested potatoes. not the potatoes that you and I know. We use lotus plant in the vast marshes up further north. The wild animals that walk in front of the glaciers, we followed them. We've seen them. So, but it would be very hard to dispute our presence here in this particular neck of the woods. We're very fortunate to have a place like this to call home. So, maybe I should have brought the PowerPoint. but out in front there you have pamphlets that our department provided to Kickapoo Valley, very, very informational. And one of them is Ancient Artists and Sculptors. It's just out front. There's a few others which are free to take and force us to come back and bring others to replenish the supply. But I'm sorry, I've come poorly prepared, but I like answering question time myself. So, so if anybody's up for it, yes, sir.
I was wondering, with your sacred sites that you have in the valleys here, I spend a lot of time out here, so how can we be respectful of those sites, and if we ever come upon them, what should we do?
Well, we often run into this, and we have many sites here on the reserve. Some are on the state side and some are on our side. And we try not to make them obvious because we're afraid of vandalism. And sometimes people do not keep their little four-wheelers on the designated path or their horses on the proper horse trails. And that's all we can ask them to do. I mean, we don't have police out there to chase them down, so it's just a manner of respect on both sides. I mean, it would be very rude for us as Native Americans to go right up to Rockton here at the cemetery and ride our four-wheelers through that. I mean, there are unknown, unmarked cemeteries out there presently, so, and I don't mean to sound disrespectful, but the respect unit works both ways. So that's the way I look at it. So, yes, sir.
Just to follow with that, so if I came to a medicine wheel, can I enter that site, and then how would I be respectful within that?
Just don't take anything away from it. Just leave it the way you found it. Yeah.
What would a medicine wheel be?
Well, a medicine wheel doesn't really, it's more of a Western thing amongst Western tribes. And would be similar to Stonehenge, yes. Constellations and whatnot were being used. Here in Wisconsin, we had something similar, effigy mounds, conical mounds, linear mounds. And often they use the solstice and the stars for the construction, when constructing these mounds. Here in this neck of the woods, we just have rock art right now. So there's rock art in the back hills and marker trees. You have a few yet. You do have some conicals, but I'm not free to disclose where those are sitting. So,
Did you all have a name for this region, and both in your language and what we'd understand?
oh, our latest name for it has a reflection on occupants who stayed here in Wisconsin for a very brief period, and those were the Kickapoo. And we would call it where the Kickapoo sit. So So that's what we know it as, yeah. So,
And then, about the mounds, when is it that your people stop building mounds in this, the bigger region?
I believe we stopped building mounds around this, just before the French showed up. 1600s, so the latest creations are sitting over there by Lake Ross. So it wasn't all that long ago. No, actually, they're to the west, to the south, and to the north, to the east. And this is kind of like the center point. One of the things, if you enjoy going hiking, we still have them yet, and they're called marker trees. You often find them up on ridge tops and on big oak trees where an arm will be pointing straight out. And these will often set you in a direction of a village site, spring, or a group of mountains. These were road maps way back in the day. So, Yes, ma'am.
Are you familiar with Black Hawk Rock?
Yes, I was climbing up that rock one time and lost my footing and kind of rolled halfway down. And yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Why is that so notorious? Is it because of the view that you perceive when you're at the top, or is that, how does that tie into Native American culture and heritage?
Well, years ago, we as native people, and if some of you look at your own Bible, or if you belong to another belief system, humans always chose a high point to fast and try and commune with the Creator. And that is a very high point. And for us, it was one of our fasting sites. One, we didn't just have the one, we had many all over. So, but, so I am familiar with your Black Hawk Rock down here, and yeah, beautiful hill. Nice horse trails back there, and my brother-in-law and I were back there 4 or 5 months ago, and I was asked to reconstruct somewhat of a marker tree, but there's an old horse trail there, and people are still going down the trail, so I created a blockade using small maple saplings, so eventually they'll grow together and create that barrier. So in the next couple of years we'll see how it does. But we're also going to try and recreate out of oak marker trees once again. So yeah.
How did they make a marker tree?
A marker tree was done in the early spring during the rains, taking a young maple, not maple, oak, and bending it to some degree, and using different weights to hold it in place for a couple of years, and after it set for a couple of years, and untie it, and if it didn't spring up, use it as a marker after that. So.
Did you remove other branches or anything?
No. So they're becoming very few now. So
I was always heard that they would take young maples and bend them to the.
maples don't really have that longevity like oaks do. Yes, sir.
In the archaeological record, it looks like about 1400 there was a pretty significant depopulation in this area, kind of coinciding with the demise of Cahokia down in the American bottom. It predate by about 100 years the arrival of white people in this region. And I'm wondering if you'd ever heard any stories or any explanation for what happened.
Well, I hope I don't hurt anyone's feelings now. I have a saying about archaeology. For me, myself, I attained my education by listening to older people. And we have an education process as well. But these gentlemen were like the doctors of all doctors, and you know, when they spoke, I mean, too bad if you didn't hear them. But they liked my opinion of them was archaeology is an unrefined science based on conjecture and speculation. I will always hold true, I mean, hold my ground on that fight. Because in some instances, we, the native, there are some things we don't even understand anymore. So how the heck is a archaeologist going to be able to tell us more of what we are? The Illinois River, which runs down to Cahokia in that direction, in the Ho-Chunk language was known as the edge, or the real river. And supposedly, our domain, that was our border for our southern domain. So what happened on the other side of that river, we don't know. But at that time, reflecting back to rock art, along Wisconsin here, in this area here, there is some rock art which depicts a boat with a man standing there. And it's kind of cute, but the point I make with this is Trempealeau and Aztalan, those were southern invaders coming into the northern domain. And with what evidence has been recovered thus far, it proves that they were invaders, and the original occupants finally had enough and destroyed them and drove them back down the rivers once again. So, but if you want to quote me on that and put that in Sunday's paper, it'd be nice. Yes, sir.
What about the Kickapoos? Were they invaders or were they offshoots?
Kickapoos, like I say, they were just here for a short period.
Up from the south?
They came from Chicago way.
Chicago area?
Right.
They weren't an offshoot of the Ho-Chunk, they came from outside?
No, they didn't even speak close to the Ho-Chunk language. They spoke the Algonquin language. Totally different. So, see, these people, the Algonquin speakers, came into Wisconsin after warfare and disease had decimated our populations, and our subsidiaries forced to go across the Mississippi, and different things were happening. We had gunpowder flintlocks showing up and all kinds of goodies going on, and new diversions, new things happening, and so we gradually lost more and more, and the incoming people had overtaken much of the lands, and we were at the mercy of many of the Algonquin-speaking nations for quite a while until we regrouped and resized, and by then it was much too late, and by then the French were seeking alliances against the British, and different things were going on here in America. I mean, after the French and Indian Wars, you had to deal with the British and the Americans fighting each other, and so fortunately, a lot of things happened for us over here that weren't so good either. So, and hopefully we can, through our little Kickapoo Valley here, we can make new alliances. I mean, like I say, we can go back to the common interest, common stewardship of keeping the valley clean, green, and on both sides. So, you know, we have a lot of common interests. You love morel mushrooms, so do I. But one thing I will urge, and this has been my preaching speech, is the waters. Protect our waters as best we can. I heard somebody speaking about springs here in the valley a little while ago. Once we lose our springs, you know, a lot of things are going to happen for the worse for us here. Not just for the animals, but you and I both. So that is a dilemma that we're going to be faced with. So I won't get into Mitt or Obama. That's way off my targets. So, but ecology I do believe in. So, yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir, for speaking with us tonight. I wonder if you could speak about corn.
Corn. In which way?
Well, I've heard that there's a whole corn culture that runs up through the Mississippi, and I'm wondering if that was part of the stories or what the uses and kinds of corn that was grown here. Did you see there's a lot of corn grown here now, and I'm just a brand new farmer and wanting to know more about the people that walked here and lived here.
Well, the guy that would have done the PowerPoint presentation has his theory on corn. Excuse me. Ho-Chunk people have been growing vast fields for a number of years, you know, and our ancestors had always told us that the farming that we do now is so small scale in comparison to what we did a long time ago. And the corn is a part of our oral history. And some people would like to say we got it from the Mississippians. It may be true, I don't know. I wasn't on one of those early barges coming up with the corn. I can just tell you what our Creator gave to us. And one of the few things that He gave to us was corn. He gave it to us in a division. The other item He gave to us was tobacco. Those we hold sacred yet today. We use them in our ceremonies, and so corn has been with us for a very long time. I don't know if it was here when we're retreating back and forth with the glaciers, but I can only tell you what my older relatives told me before they left. So, but we've had corn, we've had tobacco, we've had squash, we had melons, we had all kinds of things. And we also depended on the bounty of nature. I mean, like I said, the wild potatoes, the wild onions, leeks, and other things that grew with the season. So, I bet you a lot of people, well, I do things that upset people, and I believe that my ways of life were given to me by God Himself. The Wisconsin Department of DNR can't tell me how many trees I can use for a ceremony without a permit. They can't do that to me. They tried, but we kind of argued out in the woods and jumped around and hollered. And the most they gave me was a warning, and I kind of gave them, thank you. I gave them back the warning, and so, But we harvested lotus plants, the root. A tubular plant, just like a potato. You can't do it now with the DNR watching. You can't do that. We got so many can'ts lately on what we can do as people. But we can go and terrorize a wolf up and beat him up some. But that's another story, and I might get carried out on that one. So, Yes, sir.
Want to go with the corn and be very respectful about corn and the water. So here I drink out of the artesians and the springs, and there's still conventional farming going on here with chemicals, genetically modified corn. Would the Ho-Chunk support having this valley be organic on the lands in the reserve so that we wouldn't contaminate the water?
I would believe that they would support organic farming. I really do. Our buffalo farm had natural feed for its bison. We didn't use any chemically treated feeds for them. We had banded cattle at one time, but our herder fell in love with them and made them into pets and forgot what we were raising them for. So they were to be organic at one time too. So,
So within this reserve, there is conventional agriculture.
right,
We should try and protect the water.
we should. I think we should. I would stress it. Because we're not going to be around forever, you and I. It's our grandchildren, great-grandchildren who are going to inherit this mess here. So the more we do for them, the better off we're all going to be. I mean, so. Oh, any other thoughts? Yes, sir.
We live along the Bad Axe River, and I wondered if that was an accurate, translation of what that river was called or is called by you.
Let's see, the Bad Axe River. My wife's people participated in that massacre there. They were the Sauk. And unfortunately, the Ho-Chunk could only sit and watch. They couldn't give aid. And it's too bad. We were participants because we watched, which forced us into other treaties to give up more lands in Wisconsin. So, yeah, so something like that wasn't too good for us again. So, Yes, sir.
In your native languages, are you working with your youth to preserve the native languages, or is that a challenge for you?
The native language, Ho-Chunk language is presently, we have young people involved with that very much. But yes, it is a challenge. We all have the same problem as you do. We have, okay, I was just talking about this yesterday. We all grew up on where at least once a month the whole family got together and went to Grandma's house and had Sunday dinner, over, ate, and fell asleep in the yard, played cards, football, and stuff like that. We all used to do that one time. I mean, not only us, but you guys as well. We don't do that anymore. We have too many diversions out there and too many things which take away our young people, and God, it's terrible. I mean, we all suffer the same things, that our young people are being pushed into a world of technology where the world of technology is just a plaything. It's a plaything for them now. Whereas when we were, oh boy, we're telling on ourselves now. But computers or Pong back then was a big game, and, you know, I mean, computers were huge back then. They did very little. So, yes, ma'am.
I have a similar question, kind of, your current traditions, rituals, or whatever you'll call them, like when someone dies or marriages, that type of thing, how far, I mean, to how it was done years and years ago and how it's done today and how much of that still goes on. You kind of already answered that, I think, but.
How much of that still goes on?
Well, like, I have a friend who's Ho-Chunkin, whose brother recently died, and he kind of shared with me a little bit about what the family does, and it was like a 3 or 4 day kind of a thing, and I just wonder how far back, does that date way back, or, does that kind of change or evolve?
Well, I'm sure different things have changed or evolved. And a young man had said to me last spring, why don't we have traditional foods on the table in the evenings? It's what are traditional foods? What are they to you? Well, we should have deer meat. We should have all kinds of wild animals. Well, for you that might be tradition. But tradition is what we make it as individuals. One family may say it's okay to have lasagna and different things that, as such, at that kind of function. Everything changes. If we don't adapt, what is your ethnic background?
Mine?
Yes.
Lithuanian, Irish, German.
What do Lithuanians do?
Well, that was my point. I don't know a heck of a lot of my background. I really don't.
Don't they kind of live like Danes or Swedes or?
I know some of the ethnic foods are delicious, but bacon, sour cream, butter, sausage.
I like those too. But the point, you know, I try to get away from a point with non-native people or young people like this where they portray Native Americans living on teepees or things as such. I mean, this is crazy. People still think we live in teepees. I mean, I live in a house just like you do. I like showers every day just like you do. I watch direct TV just like you do. You know, and but yeah, we all adapt. We have to adapt. But somehow or another, we have to try and stay with the simplest things to preserve. Example again, water, resources once again. So that's probably a downside to my thoughts. So, Yes, ma'am.
What are your traditions around death? What do people do?
I don't like to talk about that matter to the general public. That's more or less a closed door situation. But we do a lot of eating, so. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Does the Ho-Chunk Nation have water quality standards or air quality standards?
We should. We should, but we're growing. We'll get there. We've adapted some ordinances and that's one we haven't done yet. So, Yes.
You mentioned earlier that the NR was not allowing you to do certain things. Does that carry over onto the trust land itself?
No, they can't bother our trust lands. They would love to. Yes, sir.
The landscape around here is very, very different now than it was several hundred years ago. Mostly due to the fact that there's really no burning anymore. And I'm wondering if there's any work being done on tribal lands to sort of restore native ecosystems through burning, controlled burning.
We try that every other year on the reserve here. We do try. But we have other trust lands that need the same passion given to it as well. And our natural resources department, they're bigger than us. They've got 16 people. Our little department has 5? 6, sorry. So sometimes we have to go and sit with them and help burn. So several hundred years ago, I didn't think it changed that much around here. Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering if there's any stories that are still being told about the time of when this was the Driftless era, the place that was not kissed by the Ice Age. Do you have other stories?
You know, we talk about the animals that we mentioned. And I'm going to slap myself with this too, but I have a friend, his name is Ernie Bozart. He's an archaeologist. He comes and bothers me now, but he's taken me to some rock art places and has the same animals that I told you about. And it's really interesting sometimes to see these sites. And when I was like 10 years younger, I could crawl on my back without the stomach hitting the ceiling of this cave that we'd have to crawl through. But there were some nice rock art features in there. And 40, 50 years ago, this farmer was quite concerned about this tunnel being vandalized. He blew one end shut to protect it. And he had the opening so people wouldn't bother it anymore. So it was nice though, and we don't see too many people like that. So I hope that helps your Driftless area thought. But you can sit back, you can look. Come down here when it's nice and foggy. Don't get hit by a deer or something, but put your imagination to use and you can look at the fog and imagine these huge animals walking through and, you know, things as such. I mean, something to sit and think about, you know, and it's really interesting that, well, shoot, back in 1890s, 1910s, in this part of the world when these woolly elephants were being hunted and killed with, prairie du chien chert or Hickston chert, they were surprised that some of these animals died with arrowheads embedded in their bones and whatnot. I mean, we weren't smart enough to do that, according to the archaeologists back then. So, but we had to eat. You and I both had to eat back then. Yes, ma'am.
Did you use any bow and arrow hunting within your memory?
My nephews just do it. My nephews do it yet, just to tease me. So.
Actually bringing down a deer? Can they bring a deer down?
Right. Yeah, they're my worst critics. Those guys are. So. Yes, ma'am.
I know a lot of people were really sad when the Ho-Chunk herd was sold near Muscadet.
Yes.
Do you think there's going to be another herd that might emerge in the future?
There's talk. It's just talk. It'll be never on that scale again. The original intent, I was a legislature on the nation at that time, was to have a herd no bigger than 16. But somehow or another, it kind of grew up to 120 head, and something else happened, and so eventually, a year or two, maybe we'll have a small herd back. So, Okay. Well, my brother-in-law, he gets to drive home, so I get to sit on his side and sleep. And so, but I thank you for coming tonight. I'm very pleased to see this number of people come out. And I'm sure Mr. Quackenbush could have done a better job with his PowerPoint. And like I say, I don't like filling in for people too often. But it's been an honor and a privilege to address you all tonight. And hopefully you can, if I see you on the street sometime in Viroqua or Lafarge, you can say, we've seen you one time. Thank you.